The name Mexican Mafia, or sometimes you hear La Ime, it just conjures up these images, right? Power, fear.
Sure, definitely. There's a whole mystique around it.
But here's something that might surprise you, like right off the bat. Despite the name, it didn't start in Mexico at all. It's entirely a U.S. thing, born inside prisons.
It's a really striking paradox, isn't it? The name points one way, but the reality, it's rooted firmly in the California prison system.
Exactly. And that's what we're really digging into today. We've got this great set of sources you provided, articles, some pretty deep research.
Yeah.
And our mission really is to pull out the key stuff for you, the origins, the structure, the impact, maybe some of those surprising details about the Mexican Mafia.
Think of it as getting the core understanding. We're trying to piece together how this often misunderstood and very secretive group actually works.
Okay, so let's rewind. Where and when did it all begin? The sources point to 1957. That's, wow, over 65 years ago.
Yeah, a long history. And the place wasn't some border town. It was the dual vocational institution in California.
Dual. What was significant about that place back then?
Well, interestingly, it started as a California Youth Authority facility. It housed younger offenders initially before becoming an adult prison. So that maybe tells you something about the age of the first members.
Right, young guys. And the founder, Luis Hiroba Flores. Sources mention his connection to the Barrio Hawaiian Gardens gang. Is that connection important?
Oh, definitely. Flores coming from Hawaiian Gardens is pretty significant. Back in the 50s, 60s, Southern California Hispanic neighborhoods, they had intense rivalries. Gangs from different barrios were often fighting each other fiercely.
Okay, so you've got these existing street wars happening outside. But inside Duel, Flores gets these guys together to form the Mexican Mafia. And the initial reason, based on what we read, was basically protection.
Exactly. Protection for Hispanic inmates against other groups in the prison. Kind of a basic survival instinct kicking in within that environment.
But it didn't stay just about protection for long, did it?
No, not at all. It quickly shifted. They aimed to control the prison's black market. You know, contraband, gambling, that sort of thing. Power and profit became goals early on.
And the name, La M, just the Spanish sound for M. There was this idea, apparently, to sort of emulate the American Mafia, even using the black hand symbol or referencing it.
Yeah, that aspiration tells you a lot about their early ambitions. They saw the structure, the perceived power of the Cosa Nostra, and kind of wanted to mirror that. The black hand thing really points to wanting that established, maybe even romanticized criminal identity.
Our sources really stress that Flores deliberately recruited the most violent guys he could find, even from these warring street gangs. The goal was fear, right from the start.
Absolutely. Fear and intimidation were the tools.
And here's what I find fascinating. Getting members from different rival Hispanic gangs to unite under one banner. That was apparently almost unthinkable back then.
It really was. You have to picture the level of hatred between some of those street gangs. For Flores to pull them together inside prison, it shows how the prison environment created this different dynamic, a shared enemy or a shared goal maybe that was stronger than the old barrio rivalries.
Okay, so fast forward a few years, in 1961. Things get so violent at Duel that the authorities transfer some of these founding members to San Quentin, thinking that'll break them up maybe.
Yeah, that was the hope. But it pretty much did the opposite.
How so?
Well, almost immediately, you have this incident with Cheyenne Cadena. He apparently killed a black inmate just for approaching him. And the chilling part, over 1,000 inmates around, supposedly, and not one witness stepped forward.
Oh, wow. That sends a message.
A very clear message. It established their dominance, their ruthlessness within San Quentin. But all that violence, the control, the theft, it started to alienate other Mexican-American inmates. Guys who weren't part of La IMA just got tired of it.
And that dissatisfaction led to something else, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's where Nuestra Familia, our family, comes from. Formed in the mid-1960s, largely as a reaction against La IME.
The big rivals. Initially, Laimi kind of looked down on them, called them farmers.
They did dismiss them, which turned out to be a huge mistake.
Because of the Shoe War. 1968, San Quentin.
That was the flashpoint. It sounds minor, a dispute over stolen shoes, but it exploded. 19 inmates stabbed, 1 La IME associate killed. That event cemented Nuestra Familia as a serious, organized rival.
So the battle lines were drawn inside prison. But Laima's influence didn't just stay there.
No, definitely not. As members got released, they took the organization to the streets, primarily controlling drug distribution in Southern California.
How did they manage that?
Through taxing. They demanded a percentage, a tax, from drug dealers operating in territories they claimed. If you didn't pay, well, you faced the consequences. It was about revenue, but also about asserting control.
An important note here, the sources clarify. This original Mexican Mafia, Laime from California, is distinct from the new Mexican Mafia that formed later in Arizona prisons around 74.
Right. They split off in 78, apparently had conflicts over the name within Arizona's system. Different rules, different leadership. It's easy to confuse them, but they're separate entities.
Okay, let's talk structure. How is Laime actually organized? The number of made members, the core group.
Right.
Sources vary a bit, maybe 250 to 300. Or up to 500.
The estimates do differ, yeah. But the key point is that the actual made members, the carnelles, are relatively few compared to their overall network.
Which is massive, right.
Yeah.
Thousands of associates and potentially over 50,000 foot soldiers, the Sureños on the streets who follow their orders.
Exactly. It's this pyramid structure. A small leadership core, often incarcerated for life, directing a vast network outside.
It makes sense, then, that the U.S. government reportedly calls them among the most powerful, dangerous, and feared criminal organizations in the world.
Yeah.
That's quite a label.
It is. And it reflects decades of documented activity, violence, control, reach.
And at the heart of it is this blood oath Flores and Cadena set up. Blood in, blood out. Membership is for life. The only way out is death.
That's fundamental. It creates this intense loyalty, even if it's enforced by fear. Makes it incredibly hard for law enforcement to break ranks or get informants.
And they have these commandments, these rules. Some are what you might expect. No snitching, no cowardice.
Standard stuff for groups like this, yeah. Protect the organization.
But others are more specific, like don't harm other members or their families, don't steal from members. Rules against things like homosexuality or sex offenses involving kids.
Right. These rules serve different purposes. Some are about internal order, preventing infighting. The prohibitions on certain acts might be about projecting a sort of internal code, however contradictory that seems given their overall activities. It's complex.
And the big one, the gang comes before everything. Family, religion, your own life. Plus, mandatory retaliation if the gang is disrespected.
Total commitment is demanded.
Right.
And the retaliation rule ensures a cycle of violence.
There's also that rule about needing a 3-member vote to kill a made member.
Yeah.
Suggests internal hierarchy, right? Killing an outsider is easier.
Absolutely. It shows that made members have a certain status, a protection level within their own brutal system.
And this control, it extends down to nearly every Hispanic street gang in Southern California, the Sureños. They basically have to follow orders from Laime members or face death.
That's the structure described. Laime acts like the board of directors, often from prison, and the Sureño gangs are the street-level operators, carrying out orders, kicking up taxes. It's a vast network of control.
Which brings us to their actual criminal activities. The list is long and pretty grim. Drug trafficking, extortion, illegal gambling, prostitution, assault, murder.
It's the typical organized crime portfolio, really, but drugs and extortion seem to be the big money makers and power bases.
We see examples right from the start. 1957, robbery and murder of a grocer. 1958, stabbing a sheriff sergeant in court. That's incredibly bold.
Yeah, audacious. And also, in 58, killing a prison guard. They were establishing their reputation for ruthlessness immediately, sending a message they weren't afraid of consequences.
Then in 1971, the first documented murder ordered from inside prison to happen outside. Alfonso Alvarez, killed for not sharing drug tax money with the leaders, the Emeros.
Right, the Emeros, often the high-ranking lifers. That murder showed their reach, controlling things on the street even while locked up.
And this is where Joe Peg-Leg Morgan becomes prominent. It's interesting, him being a white guy who rose so high.
Very unusual. It speaks to his abilities, his connections, especially reportedly to drug suppliers in Mexico, and probably his own capacity for violence. He was crucial in expanding their drug operations.
In the 70s, they even got into infiltrating community programs, like drug prevention stuff.
Yeah, under Morgan's protege, Rodolfo Cadena, they diverted funds. And when the founder of one program, Ellen Delia, tried to expose it,
She was murdered, 1977.
a brutal example of silencing opposition, shows their reach and willingness to eliminate threats.
The violence just continues through the 80s. Alfred Chato Sandoval, multiple murders in 84. The Ayala brothers, executed in 85 over a drug debt.
These cases highlight the enforcement side of their operations. Debt collection, eliminating rivals, internal discipline. It's all enforced with extreme violence.
And the internal violence, too. Salvador Monbuenrostro stabbed in 91. Charlie Brown Manriquez murdered in 92, supposedly for cowardice.
Shows that the rules, the blood in, blood out ethos, applied just as much internally. Disloyalty or perceived weakness wasn't tolerated.
Then there's that bizarre moment in 92 where Joe Morgan actually orders a stop to drive-by shootings in East L.A., temporarily at least.
Yeah, that's a fascinating example of their power. They could apparently turn the violence up or down in certain areas, demonstrating incredible influence over street gangs, probably strategic, not altruistic, but still shows control.
Then the feds hit them with a cohort indictments in the mid-90s, targeting the leadership.
RIO Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. It's designed to dismantle criminal enterprises, a major effort.
But it didn't stop them, clearly. Violence continued. Mike Aka Eisen, a high-ranking member, killed in 2001.
No, they proved resilient. Their structure, operating from prison, the loyalty, it makes them hard to dismantle completely, even with RICO.
And more recent indictments show they're still very active. 2006, more violence, drug dealing, extortion, control in prisons. 2012, a big drug network found operating inside a San Diego jail.
Right. Still managing operations from behind bars.
Even as recently as 2022, that big fight with MS-13 in a federal prison in Texas. It caused a nationwide lockdown of federal prisons. Shows their influence is still there, even at high security levels.
Definitely. It's a reminder they remain a major force within the prison system, capable of causing significant disruption.
And law enforcement efforts continue. Just this year, January 2025, big arrests in San Diego. Charges, murder, extortion, drug and weapons trafficking, still operating, still being targeted.
It's an ongoing cycle. The core activities persist. Drugs, extortion, violence orchestrated largely from within prison, despite constant pressure from law enforcement.
Okay, let's quickly cover allies and rivals. It sounds like a pretty complex map. Allies include Armenian power, sometimes the Aryan Brotherhood.
Yeah, the AB alliance often seems pragmatic, based on common enemies inside prison. They're willing to carry out violence.
Also links to traditional mafia families, biker clubs like Hells Angels and Mongols. Those can be on again, off again.
And critically, alliances with Mexican cartels like Sinaloa and Tijuana for the drug trade, and of course, their control over the Sureños street gangs.
On the rivals list, Black Guerrilla Family, Bloods, Crips.
And the big ones, Norteños and their arch nemesis, Nuestra Familia. That conflict goes way back.
Even Hells Angels at times, and groups like Los Zetas from Mexico. Lots of potential for conflict.
It's a constantly shifting landscape of prison and street rivalries, mostly over territory, drug markets, and old grudges.
Finally, symbols and culture. The main symbol is that eagle and snake, like on the Mexican flag, but on a flaming circle with cross knife.
Right. Very common in tattoos. A clear identifier.
And the number 13, M, is the 13th letter, used heavily by the Sureños to show allegiance.
Exactly. It's visual branding, essentially. It marks territory and loyalty.
Then there's the impact of movies. American Me in 92 really put them on the map for a lot of people, but caused huge controversy.
Massive controversy. Edward James Olmos, the director and star, reportedly got death threats. And tragically, 2 consultants on the film were murdered.
Though a direct link to Loemi wasn't definitively proven in those murders, right?
Not proven legally, no. But the timing and context raised serious concerns. The film hit some nerves, specifically how it portrayed Rodolfo Cadena's death and a homosexual rape scene. Joe Morgan even sued over his depiction.
Yeah, clearly they didn't like how they were shown.
It shows how sensitive they are to their public image, even in fictional portrayals.
And then Blood In, Blood Out from 93. Fictional, but heavily inspired by Laim, right? Characters based loosely on figures like Morgan.
Yeah, it's another cultural touchstone. While fictional, it draws heavily on the real dynamics of Laime, the AB, BGF, thinly veiled as different prison gangs. It offers another lens, albeit traumatized, on that world.
So wrapping this up, if we boil it down, what are the big takeaways here?
Well, you have an organization born purely in a California prison in the 50s.
Yeah, not Mexico.
Right. And it evolves into this incredibly powerful criminal entity. Its reach goes way beyond prison walls, controlling street gangs, running drug empires, extortion rackets, all enforced by extreme violence and a strict code.
It really is remarkable, considering the origins, how deep that influence runs, from inside prison outwards, even impacting popular culture.
Absolutely. The way they built and maintained that structure, that power from such a confined starting point, it's quite something, both sophisticated and incredibly brutal.
It makes you think, doesn't it, about how these groups form, why they last so long, inside prison and out. What does it say about power, control, maybe even loyalty, however twisted?
It certainly raises questions about the prison environment itself and how it can maybe inadvertently foster such organizations and the challenges in truly disrupting them. It's a complex dynamic between the inside and the outside.
Yeah, a sobering thought. So if folks listening found this interesting, where could they look next?
Well, you could definitely dive deeper into the history of prison gangs across the U.S. It's a fascinating, often dark part of the criminal justice story.
Or maybe look at how organized crime, like May, specifically impacts communities on the outside, the street level effects.
Exactly. There's a lot out there. Understanding groups like the Mexican Mafia gives you a real insight into the broader world of organized crime, its methods, and its lasting impact.